No permit. This vessel is being confiscated, the Coast Guard officer snapped. An elderly veteran clung desperately to the weathered boat's rail, his eyes reflecting soul-deep pain. Bystanders just watched, no one intervening. But just 1 hour later, 6 naval warships cut through the waves toward the harbor, flags billowing in the wind. Do you believe justice still exists in this world? Type honor to show gratitude to those who sacrificed everything for our freedom. The old man's name was John Matthews, 82 years old, who had served in the U.S. Navy for more than 35 years. The aging wooden boat called Liberty Star wasn't just a vessel, it was his soul, tied to decades spent patrolling the waters to protect freedom. After retirement, John had saved every penny to preserve this boat as a living memento of his service. The small pension he received barely covered his basic needs, yet he would sooner skip meals than neglect the maintenance of Liberty Star. Each morning, like clockwork, he would row the Liberty Star around the small harbor, collecting trash from the water. A voluntary service he had provided for the past 20 years. The local shopkeepers knew him by name, occasionally offering coffee or sandwiches in appreciation for keeping their waterfront clean. But that day, a team of young Coast Guard officers approached to inspect his operating permit. Their boat pulled alongside Liberty Star with official authority, the youngest officer eyeing the peeling paint and worn planks with obvious disdain. They coldly informed him that the boat no longer met new safety standards and would be confiscated. One officer held up a clipboard listing multiple violations: outdated fire extinguisher, missing emergency beacon, insufficient life preservers. John tried desperately to explain. I'm not conducting business or carrying passengers. I'm just cleaning up garbage. Been doing it for decades without trouble. The Coast Guard team leader shrugged indifferently. Rules are rules, old man. This vessel is deemed unsafe for harbor operations. We have orders to impound it immediately. No one bothered to ask why the shabby boat still flew the American flag with such pride, or why it still bore the Navy's honor plaque from 40 years ago. No one noticed the small wooden box securely fastened beneath the steering wheel, containing medals and commendations earned in waters far more dangerous than this peaceful harbor. When they used a crane to lift Liberty Star from the water, John embraced the boat's side, tears streaming down his weathered face. This is my last home, my last connection to who I was. A child standing nearby asked his mother, "Why are they taking the old man's boat?" The mother shook her head, pulling her child away, as if fearing the heartbreak might be contagious. But the boy kept looking back, confused by the injustice he was witnessing. On the boat's worn deck lay medals that had slipped from John's pocket, bronze stars and service commendations now scattered like worthless trinkets. As the Liberty Star was hoisted up, photographs fell from the cabin, faded images of a young sailor standing proudly on warships, defending distant shores. The Coast Guard officers completed their paperwork efficiently, checking boxes and filing forms. One of them noticed John's military ID card, but merely logged it as prior service without further acknowledgement. John had faced raging storms, enemy fire, and the loneliness of months at sea, but nothing had prepared him for the pain of watching his final connection to that life being taken away under the indifferent gaze of the country he had served. An elderly woman approached, placing a gentle hand on John's shoulder. "Weren't you on the USS Constitution during the Gulf crisis?" she asked softly. John nodded silently, unable to speak through his grief. "My son served on that ship," she continued. "He told me stories about a captain who would stay on deck during storms, inspiring the crew when they were afraid." But her kind words were drowned out by the mechanical sounds of the crane lifting John's precious Liberty Star to the impound lot. As the boat was carried away, the American flag caught on the crane's edge and tore, falling into the water like a forgotten promise. As the Liberty Star was hoisted onto land, the flagpole snapped with a crack that sounded like a gunshot across the harbor. The American flag, the same one John had raised each morning with military precision, plunged into the murky water below. John collapsed to his knees at the dockside, his aged hands trembling as he gathered the boat's fallen fragments. A small wooden nameplate, hand-carved decades ago, lay broken at his feet. He picked it up with the care one might show a wounded bird. The Coast Guard team didn't bother to apologize. They simply completed their paperwork with cold efficiency. Forms were signed, copies were filed, and the matter was considered closed. No accommodation was made for the man's age or history. You can retrieve your personal belongings from the impound office after processing, the officer informed him, already turning to leave. Bring proper identification. A young woman passing by stopped to watch the scene unfold. She had been recording the harbor on her phone for a social media post about her vacation. Instead, she captured the moment when respect for service crumbled under the weight of bureaucracy. She quietly posted the video online with the caption, "Is this how we treat those who once protected our freedom?" This elderly veteran just lost everything because of a permit. The clip spread like wildfire across social media platforms. It was shared by veterans groups, then by military family support pages, and finally by major social media influencers outraged by the treatment of an elderly serviceman. Several nautical miles away, on the deck of the combat patrol ship USS Independence, a group of young officers viewed the video during their break. The sailors watched in stunned silence as the old man's dignity was stripped away along with his boat. The first to act was Captain Stephen Morris, who had once been John's student at the Naval Academy. Though decades had passed, he immediately recognized his former instructor in the hunched figure on the screen. "That's Captain Matthews," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "The man who taught half the commanding officers in this fleet what honor means." He sent an urgent message to nearby ship commanders. "Assemble at Newport Harbor. We have a debt to repay. One of our own needs us." The responses came swiftly. USS Resolute responding. ETA 40 minutes. Defender en route. We remember Captain Matthews. Swift justice diverting course. We stand with our own. 1 hour later, 6 warships, including 2 destroyers, an amphibious assault ship, and 3 patrol vessels, simultaneously entered the small harbor. Their presence was overwhelming in the modest port. The American flag waved proudly atop each warship, a synchronized display of solidarity that turned heads throughout the coastal town. Warning horns blared in sequence, drowning out even the sound of the crashing waves. The deep, resonant tones echoed off the buildings surrounding the harbor, drawing people from shops and restaurants. Townspeople rushed to the harbor, smartphones raised to capture the astonishing spectacle of a naval fleet approaching their quiet shores. Children pointed excitedly, while adults wondered aloud if some national emergency had been declared. A large door opened on the lead destroyer. Hundreds of sailors in crisp white uniforms disembarked, forming 2 long lines that extended from the dock to where John Matthews still sat. Captain Morris led the procession, walking with purpose between the lines of saluting sailors. He approached the spot where John Matthews sat dejected on the ground and without hesitation knelt down before his former mentor. Morris spoke, his voice breaking with emotion, yet carrying clearly across the suddenly silent harbor. "Captain Matthews, sir, please allow us to make amends for today's injustice. The Navy doesn't forget its own." The entire military company saluted him, an elderly veteran clutching splintered wood from his old boat. If you believe true justice still exists, type honor right now beneath this video. How many veterans have been forgotten? How many heroes who once stood between us and danger now stand alone, their sacrifices erased by time and bureaucracy? How many brave men and women who gave their youth to protect our freedom now face indignity in their final years? Captain Morris stood before the assembled sailors and addressed the growing crowd of townspeople. "This man before you taught me and countless others that a ship is not just a vessel, it is a vow to preserve freedom even with just one sail remaining." Those weren't just words in a classroom. They were principles Captain Matthews lived by every day of his service. Morris revealed truths that had been buried in classified records and forgotten memories. In 1983, when the commercial vessel Northern Star capsized in a storm 30 miles offshore, all official rescue vessels were deployed elsewhere. Captain Matthews, then on shore leave, took this very Liberty Star, this boat deemed unsafe today, into 18-foot waves and hurricane-force winds. The crowd murmured as Morris continued. He successfully rescued 17 people that night, making 3 separate trips into conditions that would have kept most vessels safely in harbor. He refused medical attention until every survivor was accounted for. Despite suffering 3 broken ribs, and a severe concussion when his boat was repeatedly smashed against the sinking ship's hull. An elderly woman in the crowd spoke up. "I was one of those 17. I never knew his name, but I never forgot his face." She approached John slowly, taking his weathered hand in hers. "My grandchildren exist because of you, sir." Morris turned to address the Coast Guard officers directly. "While young people today can safely attend schools and stroll through streets, it's because people like Captain Matthews courageously face dangers most civilians never have to contemplate. The freedom to enforce regulations exists because men like him ensured those regulations would be written in English, not in the language of whichever enemy might have prevailed without their sacrifice." The Coast Guard commander, who had arrived after receiving urgent calls from his superiors, stepped forward. His face showed the strain of a man caught between protocol and principle. "Captain Matthews," he said formally, "on behalf of the United States Coast Guard, I extend our profound apologies. There appears to have been a failure in our information systems. Your service record should have been flagged in our database." John looked up, his expression neither angry nor triumphant, simply tired. "No special treatment," he said softly. "I just need my boat. It's all I have left." An emergency decision was made right there at the harbor. The 6 warships' crews voluntarily contributed from their own pay, coordinating with local residents, to repair the Liberty Star that very day. A naval engineer examined the boat and declared that while it needed work, its sturdy construction, they built them right in those days, made it a worthy project. Dozens of Navy hands and townspeople worked through the night. Sailors who had trained on billion-dollar equipment now carefully sanded and varnished the wooden rails of Liberty Star. Officers who commanded nuclear vessels measured and cut replacement planks. Local craftsmen guided military precision with generations of boat-building wisdom. The Coast Guard team that had confiscated the vessel now worked alongside them. Their initial bureaucratic indifference transformed into determined restitution. The young officer who had been most dismissive of John now worked with particular intensity, as if each brushstroke could erase his earlier disrespect. When dawn broke, the Liberty Star, newly painted, each wooden plank repaired, flying a pristine American flag, floated once again upon the water. The transformation was remarkable. What had been dismissed as an eyesore now gleamed with dignity, its weathered character preserved, but its strength restored. John stood on the shore, tears streaming down his face, rendered speechless by the overnight miracle. A boy in the crowd shouted what everyone was thinking. "Mister, your boat looks beautiful." Captain Morris stepped forward, placing a new key in John's hand. "And now the Liberty Star will be an honorary vessel, representing all those who fought and never surrendered. By order of the fleet commander, it is officially recognized as a heritage craft of the United States Navy." A small ceremony was organized right at the dockside. John received the Civilian Honor Medal for the first time in many decades. The medal, long overdue, recognized not just his military service, but his continued commitment to the harbor community. Residents, Navy personnel, and the Coast Guard team members who had earlier confiscated his boat all bowed their heads in apology and saluted him. John spoke, his voice quavering but gaining strength with each word. "I don't need monuments or honors. I just need to know that the values I once protected still exist here. Today you've shown me they do. In your faces, all of you, I see that America's heart still beats strong." From that day forward, every Independence Day, the restored Liberty Star led the boat parade at the harbor, its freshly painted hull and polished brass fittings gleaming in the summer sun. A small bronze plaque was attached to the boat's side, its message simple but profound. Freedom isn't free. It's paid for with sweat, tears, and soul. John, though growing physically weaker with age, found new strength of purpose. He still came to the harbor each morning, personally polishing the flagpole until the brass gleamed in the early light. But now young Coast Guard cadets often joined him, listening to stories of storms weathered and battles fought, both at sea and in life. When asked by a journalist, "Do you regret devoting your life to the sea and service?" he would only smile, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "No. Freedom is worth every stroke of the oar I've ever pulled across these waters. The sea taught me that nothing valuable comes without effort, And nothing worthwhile is ever truly lost if someone remembers its value. The harbor itself was officially renamed Matthews Liberty Harbor, with a modest monument showing not a soldier in battle, but an old man in a small boat, cleaning the waters of his country, a different kind of service, but service nonetheless. The Liberty Star became more than just a boat. It became a classroom where John would invite school children to learn about service, sacrifice, and the true meaning of freedom. Not all battles are fought with weapons, he would tell them as they sat cross-legged on the deck. Sometimes the greatest fight is remembering what matters when the world is eager to forget. The profound truth John embodied: some things don't need grandeur, they just need respect, and they will endure forever. If you believe honor and gratitude never go out of style, subscribe to TT Hero Stories. TT Hero Stories, because some heroes never stop serving.